I told you I was feeling a lot more comfortable with the way the NHL is going because of the conversations we can have about the teams that are not in the playoffs. Let's talk about the Montreal Canadiens and a trade that almost went down, it appears, but I really couldn't find a proper source for this, so you can take this with a grain of salt. We're going over onto Spectors Hockey, because what they did was they posted another article today talking about the Montreal Canadiens and a few updates as to the latest rumors and discussions going on regarding the team. What's the latest on Carey Price's future? Will the Canadiens attempt to trade Shea Weber and Jeff Petrie this summer? Should they try to trade for Jets center Pierre-Luc Dubois? Find out in today's NHL Rumor Mill. There are the same articles that are popping up here in this piece. The Montreal Gazette piece talking about Carey Price. There's a conversation about Dubois, that in which we had yesterday on the channel as well. But there is a conversation about Shea Weber, the Montreal Canadiens' de facto captain and overall defensive workhorse in this piece as well. If we go over to Shea Weber and we take a look at his entire profile before exploring what it is the article has to say. By the way, I know a lot of people like to go in the comments and say, oh, skip to this time frame, 5 minutes and whatever seconds to hear him actually talk about what was said. Yeah, this is kind of how YouTubing works, right? I like a little bit of foreplay in the conversation, not jump straight into it. So, Shea Weber, 36 years old, 6'4", 229, a right-handed defenseman, signed to a $7.85743 million AAV deal till the end of 2026. He does not have any trade protection, but the reason for that is because this contract has gone on for such a long time. He started making this amount of money in 2012, 2013. Oh boy, what a contract. Can we count that up right here? I know it's probably common knowledge for most people, but I want to see it right here. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, 11, 12, 13, 14 years, making $7.8 million AAV. That's wild. Weber didn't play a single game this season because he's been out with injury, and he's probably never going to play another NHL game again. Last season, he had 19 points in 48 games played. The season before that, he had 15 goals. He had 6 points in 22 games when the Canadiens went to the finals, but it doesn't really go to show just what exactly Weber's impact was when you only look at the numbers or the points. Weber was a leader, Weber was a workhorse, Weber was a guy that ingrained a culture in the Canadiens organization that was just so positive, and a lot of the Canadiens today will go out there and cite Weber's leadership and his role on the team as being a very, very influential part of their Stanley Cup appearance. But either way, there is a conversation brought up by the writers on Spectors Hockey as to Shea Weber and his entire contract. Firstly, it's Stu Cowan of the Gazette who notes that the Shea Weber contract has been on the LTIR this entire year. GM Kent Hughes will attempt to trade Weber's contract during the offseason. He is also expected to shop blue liner Jeff Petrie, who has 3 more seasons left with an AAV of $6.25 million. We also had ourselves what was Lyle Richardson's Spectors note, which is the entire reason I'm making this video in the first place. Hughes tried to unload Weber's contract to the Arizona Coyotes before the trade deadline, but the Coyotes opted to take on the remainder of Brian Little's deal from the Winnipeg Jets instead. The Canadiens GM will try to entice teams seeking to reach the cap floor to take Weber off his hands. However, that could involve bundling that contract with a sweetener such as a quality draft pick, a prospect, or a decent young player. Now, I tried to find a source where exactly it was said that Hughes and the Habs tried to trade Weber to Arizona before making this video, but I couldn't really find anything. So we're just making this video off of what Lyle Richardson said here on Spectors Hockey because I trust Spectors and the website because it's a pretty good NHL news and rumor hub. And besides, the entire angle that's being brought up here is one that does make sense to me over here too. So let's go over what exactly the Brian Little trade was with the Winnipeg Jets, the Arizona Coyotes, how they got involved in this entire Weber thing, and what this potentially means going forward. So, long story short, apparently Kent Hughes tried to trade Weber to Arizona, but they said no. When Brian Little was traded to Arizona instead, this is the trade that went down. On March 21st, 2022, the Winnipeg Jets sent over Brian Little, who was making $5.29 million a season, as well as Nathan Smith, to the Winnipeg Jets in exchange for a 2022 4th-round pick. Now, Nathan Smith is the extra piece here. He is a 23-year-old player who was playing in the NCAA. It's just the signing rights to this guy that the Winnipeg Jets traded over. He got 50 points in 38 games played, so that's a really good sweetener right there. in order to take on Brian Little and the contract that he does have, which is $5.2 million a year, going on until 2024. That's the type of sweetener that it probably would have taken to send away a Shea Weber to the Arizona Coyotes instead. A prospect that is doing extraordinarily well, that has a pretty good NHL future, or maybe even just some form of an NHL future, which is a pretty good one when you consider that Nathan Smith was a guy drafted by the Winnipeg Jets in the 3rd round in 2018. And so, with Shea Weber being a guy that has more money attached to his name for a longer amount of time, it makes sense to me that the sweetener that they could or should trade over to a team like Arizona, should that Arizona team want to get on the contract, would probably be a little bit more valuable than what a Nathan Smith was to the Winnipeg Jets. As we just noted, Smith was a pretty valuable prospect in their system that they just added on as a sweetener here, so that's a pretty significant piece. You're looking at a guy that I think maybe the Canadiens could send away in their D-core because they do have some pretty good NCAA defensemen over there. There is indeed the Pitlick that they have in the collegiate system who is really good in the USHL in previous years. You have a few guys that bounce around in the Canadiens prospect system once in a while as to being potential, I hate using the word steals, but there are guys that get that steal label thrown around them a lot. Probably the biggest one right now is Josh Waugh. Even though he hasn't had an NHL impact just yet, he's just been doing his thing in the QMJHL. So, I propose this question to you. If the Canadiens went out there and they traded, let's just say for the sake of argument, Shea Weber and Josh Waugh, or Shea Weber and a Riley Kidney, or Shea Weber and, I don't know, Jaden Struble or something, to the Arizona Coyotes in exchange for a 4th-round pick in order to get rid of that Shea Weber contract, would you have been able to do that move? For me personally, I think about the Canadiens and what they have on their pipeline, and I say no. I say they don't really need to do a move like this. I say, sure, Shea Weber's contract sucks, but it is LTIR worthy, and you don't really need to go out there and shell it out right away because you kind of don't really have a competitive team at the moment, right? There is no harm in holding onto a contract like Shea Weber unless a team really needs it, unless another team goes out there and says, hey, we're really strapped to the cap here, we need extra contracts with big money, we need Shea Weber, and in order to get Shea Weber, we'll give you this asset that we have because we just really need that Weber guy. That's the kind of trade that I'm hoping Kent Hughes goes out there and makes. Not the kind of trade that Brian Little got traded for, where the Winnipeg Jets had to add on some extra quality stuff in order to get that 4th-round pick in return. If it's Shea Weber over to, I don't know, some team that needs the cap like Tampa Bay, for example, for a pretty good prospect or a 4th or a 5th, and it's only Shea Weber getting sent over, then yeah, okay, you do that. You sell with the intention of getting actual tangible value for your team. You don't go out there and sell Shea Weber's contract because you just want to get rid of it. So, you can let me know in the comments all your thoughts about the Weber idea over here, whether or not he could have gone to Arizona, but ultimately, my point still stands. If Arizona was going out there trying to get Shea Weber and get a sweetener from Montreal, because you know they've been doing that a lot with all their trades as of late, then I'm happy that Kent Hughes went out there and said, no, sorry, we're not going to trade Weber, we'll wait till the offseason, maybe try to unload him to a team that actually needs him, rather than a team in Arizona that's just trying to trade away for all the bad contracts in the league while getting all the sweeteners in the process. They got Shane Goss to spare, they got Andrew Ladd, they got all these big-name players that were big names in the past, but who were undesirable contracts in the future, and said, hey, if you give us that guy, we'll take him, but you gotta add on some sweeteners for the very low price of a prospect or a pick. So, talk to me in the comments all your thoughts about Shea Weber, the Arizona Coyotes. If you're a Canadiens fan, where do you want to see Weber go in this offseason? Where do you think his services will be best used? And which teams in the NHL do you think could give up the most for a Shea Weber? We talked about a few teams over the past few years. You have Tampa Bay with Brent Seabrook. You have the other examples like Arizona, which is the opposite, but still the point remains. Do you want to see Shea Weber get traded? Do you want to see his contract go to another team? We already talked about the Wild as well and how they were in those conversations, but ultimately that did not happen. But let me know in the comments either way what your thoughts are on Weber and the Canadiens. I hope you enjoyed this video, and bye.